Welcome to the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Schupnacht, and today's guest is Terry Short, and she is the author of The Words We Choose. Let's get into it. Hi, Terry. Thank you so much for joining the Beyond the Bestseller podcast. I'd love to start out by having you introduce yourself, if you would.
Absolutely, Kelly. I'm thrilled to be here. I love what you're doing, and I love the opportunity to tell about myself. Who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I get to say now I'm an author, and that's super fun to say that. And prior to that, for a long time now, I've been a coach and a consultant, and in the corporate world and out of the corporate world, and so on and so forth. And I love that I'm able to share knowledge that I've gained over the years by way of my book, by way of being on podcasts like this, speaking gigs, I do workshops, that kind of thing. So my business is the Thriving Leader Collaborative, and that's the forum for under which I do that work.
Nice. I love it. So your book is The Words We Choose, and I'd love you to tell me a little bit about it. The title has me right there. I am intrigued. So talk to me a little bit about your book and kind of why you published it.
Absolutely. So, for kind of decades, not to make myself seem old or not to make myself feel old, for decades, I would be consulting and coaching leaders. Or even when you watch television, to be quite honest, during the election cycle, I'd hear people say things, and I would think, whoa, 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 hang on. There's a better way to say that. And I'm not so sure that's what you intended. I'd listen to leaders and I'd hear them use words that were limiting themselves. And I'd go, hang on, what if you said it this way? And I kind of found my sensitivity to that spreading. So it was spreading. And, maybe, Kelly, I always had that sensitivity with my own family. Truth be known, it's possible that it developed there. And then, just sort of in the world at large. And with my children, and am I using the right pronouns and everything, just sort of across the board. And I started sort of probably family and then work. And then I thinking of the world in large. And I thought, I'll write a book about this. I'm going to pull this together for the average person. So that's what I did.
Can you give me an example of the words we choose? Something that you talk through in the book, like choosing certain words over other words? Like, do you have examples that you can share of times where people should be more mindful of the words that they're choosing?
Absolutely. Let me back up a little bit and give you more of an overview of the book. So the first chapter is about the words we choose for ourselves. And that's that internal narrative. I actually call it your personal podcast. People have their headphones on, they're listening to your podcast right now. But 24/7, they're listening to their own personal podcast. And sometimes it wakes you up in the middle of the night. But it ends up, you get to decide though about that podcast. You're the director, you're the narrator, you're the host. You decide if your mother's coming on tonight or not, right? So I start with your personal podcast. I don't call it that in the book because I thought of that after I started doing so many podcasts. But that internal narrative and how important it is to get that right, because it can uplift and inspire us, or it can denigrate or minimize, limit us. And then I go from there to words we choose with loved ones, because there's a history that develops, and there's some things that activate us, and how we will then think about those word choices and help our own selves through such situations. And then I go to the words we choose at large, and I cover things such as ageism and sexism and racism. And I pull in some experts in all those realms. And those who are dealing with alcohol and substance abuse, those who are dealing with grief. So it, really goes very, very broad. I already mentioned the pronouns. Gender identity, there's a whole section around that, and slang. Then I go to words we choose at work. So specifically at work, and I do a little bit actually in healthcare because I spent so long in healthcare. And then eventually to words we choose in writing and text and email, and that matters, right? The use of emojis or no emoji, what have you. And I wrap it all up with the words that we choose for the greater good. So whether you're praying or you're meditating, you're setting intentions, those word choices really matter. So back to your actual question, some of those words. So I have a list of about a half a dozen that I typically share. And so I'll share one and then we see where we go with this. One of my favorites is the difference between saying that you have to do something and you get to do something.
I've heard that one before. Yes.
Yeah. It's a game changer. You know, the real difference is a sense of burden, have to pick the kids up from school, do the laundry, go to work this morning, get to pick the kids up from school because they're not 18 yet and out the door, right? Get to do the laundry because I have a wash machine and detergent and clothes, right? You know, I have a sense of gratitude when I think about what I get to do as opposed to what I have to do.
Sure. Yeah, this message is so powerful for me right now. You mentioned having been in the corporate, in working in corporate settings before, and so part of my journey, and I don't think I've shared this with you yet, but is that I was in a corporate environment and was laid off just the end of October. And the reason I'm telling you this is I've really noticed I decided when that happened that I was going to start my business. I already kind of had it in my head, right? Like, so it was kind of like this moment of like, what are you going to do? And so I made that decision. I'm going to start my business, and I started doing that. But I really had to tune into my internal podcast and really do some self work and just, talk to myself about, I'm going to be positive. I'm going to, I'm everything is going to be great. Like I have had that self-talk since the, very first moment. And I've had so many people say to me like, wow, you're handling this really well. And, I'm like, well, I mean, not every single moment is that the case, but, it is so important, I think, to get your head in the right place and then get other people to see that you're happy, you're doing well, and and you're thriving. And then people start to see like, wow, that's great, and then it just kind of flows from there. I don't know. So that is just really, I don't know, that just really hit me. I was like, oh man, I think I need to read your book. But I definitely understand the power of that kind of your mindset, and then just how you're choosing to use your words, because you could get online and you could say negative things, you can be a victim, you can whatever, but like that's not going to help you get to where you want to be, right?
That's exactly right. And so to your point, had you moved forward after October and said, well, every time somebody asks you if your narrative had you chosen, that's the whole point of the book, is that your voice is a choice, right? Had you chosen to say, it's when someone asks you, well, what are you going to do now? Well, I might do this, or I'm just considering, and these types of minimizing words, or I probably should do such and such. I'm giving you now some of my words that like we don't say anymore. Instead, what I'm hearing is that you chose to say, well, I will do this. I'm going to do this. And you asserted it instead of, I might, probably, sort of, kind of, maybe, and terms in which we speak sometimes. And so that's very wise of you to own it. And so what you were doing, whole point of the book, is you were choosing your words. And the choice that you're making is there's something that's in your head and there's something in your heart. And in a nanosecond, you can already tell I'm a fast talker, right? In a nanosecond, we have the job to make those match for what comes out of your mouth and for the intention to be right. Because oftentimes the intentions in our heart, then there's the should and maybe and kind of and would and blah, blah, blah going on in our head. And by the time it comes out of our mouth, that it actually is aligned with what we intend.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I was challenged I would say the first few days of like, I started a business. I have a business kind of, but I don't really, my husband's like, no, you're doing this. So like, say you're doing it. I'm like, okay. So once you get some clients, then you start going, oh, okay. Like I have a business, I'm doing it, but it's weird. It's weird at first. So if anyone's in that spot, I totally have been there. But so I have a question for you. When it comes to that kind of that nanosecond, are there ways that you can I don't know, trick your brain to choose the right words? Are there ways that you can get, how do you do that if you automatically default to kind of that negative place or that wishy-washy place? Like how do you get your mind right so that decision is to be the more, I don't know how you said it, but like that firmer, like I am doing
Mhm.
this.
All right, I love this question. There's a lot wrapped up in here. So I would say first is that know the words that are no longer serving you. Figure out what they are, right? So when the book was first published, about 6 months later, Fast Company, that magazine, did a overview, and they asked me, and I think I offered them in the interview like 12 or 13 different words. And at the end, it was the person interviewing me had a laugh of it because she said, "Well, that's an awful lot." And I said, "Well, here's the deal. You can't unsee the list." Like you can't unsee the list. And if I go through my list with you and your listeners, you can't unsee the list, but the point is, what trips you up? What do you say routinely? So I
Mm.
coach and I have my clients all day, every day, and well, 3 days a week. And I know the ones that say they think they're going to do this. I know the ones that always put just in front of everything. Just getting through this last report. When you're getting through the last report, not just, there's no reason to minimize it, right? And so we have not everybody is using all of the ones that are limiting. Each person has sort of their go-to one. So know what they are first and then switch them up. Choose what the assertive word that is more aligned with your intention. Choose what that word is and use it and keep using it. And it takes a month, more or less 21 to 27 days to change a habit. So change the habit. Here's a little tip for you. So my water bottle is always on the right hand, appears to the left, I think, to you, right hand side of the desk. So if I said today that there's this word choice that I was going to change, what I'd probably do is move my water bottle to the left hand. I do this for changing any habit to the left hand side. Now, for better part of 21 days, I'm going to keep going like this to pick up the water bottle. Over here, it's not there, right? And now I've created a visual, an action and a visual to remind me that I'm going to focus on these word choices. So to answer your question, I might be in conversation, or I might be entering a meeting and joining a Zoom meeting and think, okay, I'm not going to use the word just the entire time. Now I'm going to take my water bottle and I'm going to have that as my cue that I've got this. And it just is one of those where you're not replacing it with a word, you're simply eliminating it. You're not going to use it. There's some that have replacement words, but this is a elimination situation. So choose a way to activate yourself into that behavior change.
Nice. So some of it is also just like having that self-awareness and maybe like spending some time reflecting on some of those things and then deciding when and where you need to have that kind of action trigger, whatever reminder. That's great. I love that. I cannot wait to read your book now. I wish I could have read it before we jumped into an interview, but we just met each other really quickly and jumped into this. So I definitely will be reading it. But I'd love for you to tell us. So you published this in 2020. So I'd love for you to tell me kind of about your writing process and how you approach that. I assume maybe did you write this over the pandemic or did you have it already written before that happened?
Just would be the
Okay.
answer.
Okay.
So I actually took about a year, not even. Well, by the time it was published was a year, let's say, right? But the writing process was less. So I'm a kind of a geek out about math sometimes. And so I did some research and I said, oh, I wonder if I can write a book. And what does that take? So I researched that the average nonfiction book is about 210 pages long. How many
Okay.
words are in that long of a book? 50 to 55,000. And then how many words can the average person write in an hour, right? And then I looked at my calendar and said, and how many hours a week can I dedicate? And I did it that way forward first. So this is how long it'll take. And then I say, well, that's too long. I'm going to write more words in a week. And I made these goals. I mean, sometimes they were outlandish.
Great.
I'd get to the point I'd say this week, because I missed some last week, I'm going to write 10,000 words in this week, or maybe that's a lot, maybe 5,000. And my husband, we get to the weekend and he'd say, well, we're going to take a hike or do this. I'd say, oh, no, I have 1,500 more words to write. I mean, I was obsessed with the counting and the goal and what have you. Anyway, we were going to New Zealand on March 13th of 2020. Do you remember that day? That was like,
oh my gosh.
Like
yeah, that's,
yeah, right, for the pandemic. And I made a goal.
You didn't make it there.
No, I made it there. I made the goal that it was off to the editor by the time I got on that airplane. And it was, right? Wow. So I had sent it out for different people to review. I mean, there's lots more about the details of what I did to get it to that place. But my goal was that all 6 chapters had been reviewed by others and was off to the editor by the time I got on the airplane. And I did. And the end of that story would be, we went on a 3-week trip and we stayed for 54 weeks.
Oh my gosh. That was going to be my next question. Like, did you make it back?
Yeah, that's for another podcast.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
okay.
It was great.
I want to hear that story sometime, but wow. So you did have it done though before I kind of wondered, with the timing of that, like, did you start writing that, kind of in the like, we have nothing to do right now, we can't go anywhere, I'm going to sit down and write it, but you had already gone through all of that.
Right. Well, and you'll see when you read the book, the prologue actually talks about, and even the very end, the conclusion talks about some of the communication that was going on at the same time. And that spring was George Floyd. And, there were a lot of things that influence word choices that I found appropriate to weave into the book. So I did that after it was in the hands of the editor. That's actually my number one tip to your listeners who are going to write a book is don't underestimate that editorial process.
The editing.
Yeah, okay. The editing process, it took way longer than I thought. And it's just, it really does. And it just not just, but the amount of time.
Move that water bottle.
Yeah, exactly. the back and forth, the back and forth that happens at that point, one feels strongly about getting it right. And you've put in all this work to write it. And now there's some adjustments. And, also at some point you have to put it to rest. So I think that's what a lot of people get caught up on. And I could feel myself doing that perhaps it was never going to be perfect. And I'd think of something else I wanted to add, and, the editor pulling hair out, right? And so that final process of tightening it up, maybe I made it longer than it needed to be, but it was absolutely longer than I anticipated. And I know that this time.
So that book, can you tell me, how did you publish it? Did you self-publish it or did you have a traditional publisher?
I did what would be referred to as a hybrid.
Yep.
So I reached out to a publisher who didn't publish books in my genre. And so that person said, I can't help you, but I have an offshoot hybrid. Highly recommend them. I had the most amazing experience called Epigraph Publishing out of New York.
Okay.
I maintain all the rights. In theory, I self-published, but I have Epigraph Publishing on my on my book, and then they're packages. So they're think they're little tiers, let's say. And do you need the editor? I already had an editor. Do you need the copywriting? Do you need these things? Do you need marketing? And I chose basically middle of the road based on my needs. And it was a fantastic experience. So they did the formatting and all of the layout and the cover and all of the things that were important to me to get it finalized. And it was a fantastic experience.
That's great. I love hearing that story. I worked in publishing for 10 years, but I was on the self-publishing side. So I'm a pro self-publishing person. I know, that comes up as a question. Sometimes people are like, which route should you go? But it's interesting, not every book is the same. Not every author's journey is the same. You can choose so many different paths, and it doesn't have to be one way. So I love hearing that, because I've never heard of that company that you mentioned. And so, yeah, that's interesting. What about the editing process? How did you find your editor, not having been through this process before?
And that was through a friend. Someone
Okay.
said that, a friend of a friend is an editor, and we are lifelong friends now. It was a perfect fit. And actually, she's been a part of Thriving Leader Collaborative, my business, and held retreats with me and such. And it was the best experience to make
Okay.
this connection with someone that what the content of my book truly resonated with her,
Mm-hmm.
with Deanna. And she's not a full-time publisher, so it was more of a side thing that she did. And I'm forever grateful that I was able
That's
to hook up with
awesome.
her. I would say the self-publishing thing and the way that I did it, or maybe the package that I chose, um, what I will do differently the next time is that I
Mm-hmm.
did not choose the marketing. And that's the benefit for, people that I know that were published by one of the big houses or what have you. They do all the marketing for you. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
different ballgame than what I experienced.
That's interesting though. I've heard the opposite also from authors though. So maybe it depends on who your traditional
Mhm.
publisher is or kind of
Right.
what category you're in with them, because I've heard that from a lot of authors who say the traditional publisher, you still have to do all the marketing yourself, even if you're traditionally published. But again, like maybe that just kind of depends
Right.
on who the publisher is. And again, though, like if there's no one path for any
Right.
author. So if it do, I think people can kind of get stuck in that analysis paralysis, is that like where
Mhm.
they're like, I can't make a decision because there's so many decisions or so many things to decide and so many
Mhm.
routes I could go. And I'm just like, just pick one and go, like don't
Right.
worry too much about it, don't overthink it. I'm excited for this podcast episode to come out because I have an author power circle, and these are the conversations we are having on a weekly basis, and women
Mhm.
are who are writing a book have all of these questions. So they're going to love hearing about your experience and getting some of that, insight from you, having done this not just once, but you've actually published twice.
Twice so far, working on the third book now. So
Yeah.
the second book is called The Great Lead Hership Awakening. And I'm one of 20 authors. So I wrote a chapter, and that chapter speaks to productivity, basically. It's the weaving of well-being and leadership, and how to make that such a tightly woven effort that you are indeed actually more productive because you're honoring your well-being needs. That's what I speak to in my chapter, and that's actually the focus of my business and my coaching, my consulting, and such. And that leads to the next full book that I'll be writing.
And can
I'm
you tell
writing.
us, can you give us a sneak peek into what that topic
Yeah,
is?
absolutely. So uh, leadership is an inside job, as I like to say. And even more importantly than that, great leaders are heart-based. And a
Mm-hmm.
potential working title, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'm going to throw it out there, is leadership. What's love got to do with it?
Okay.
Right. It's self-love that builds confidence, that internal narrative. I think about all the things
Mm-hmm.
that when I'm coaching individuals, I'm helping somebody get to their fullest potential. It begins with their own sense of self. And so internal narrative, so we get that right. There's a little neuroscience thrown in there. And then how do they serve others in that role? And great leaders might not use this word and they might not see it this way, but they come from their heart. And
Mm.
that's what I intend to explore and do a little more research and give people a tool, a book to reflect upon how they're leading others, how they're being in service to others as a leader from their hearts.
Yeah. I can't wait for that one to come out. Do you have an estimated publication date for that one?
Well, I did, but we're not going to make that.
Okay.
So, so I would say the end of next year. So I
Okay.
was actually thought I would be further ahead, and so they've had a few derailments, let's say. I have
Yeah, that
not
happens.
I have not stuck to my own scheduling that I told you about, the weekly. Well, to be fair, I haven't even set it up because of the derailments. I never even got to the point of, and I'm just getting there now of and now it's the end of the year, 20, fresh slate 2025, and I will be weaving that into my into my day.
Gotcha. Well, I am going to follow all of the things wherever you are online. So Terry, where can people follow you, find you online? I don't know if you have a newsletter they can subscribe to, or what social media is best. So if you can share some of that, I definitely want to. That's for my own personal desire to get on and follow all the things so I can find out about your next book. But tell us where we can find you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kelly, for asking. Well, people can email me. It's Terry, spelled Terre, at thrivinglc.com. If you go to thrivingleadercollaborative.com, you can click on a subscribe to the newsletter. And we give everything away. We give away templates and resources, and I write articles, very routinely write articles. And that, that's another strategy for writing a book is, I write articles very religiously, and that content will end up in the book. It's sort of giving myself a leg up into the process of writing the book. But yes, and then LinkedIn for sure. And LinkedIn for me, Terry Short, but also LinkedIn for Thriving Leader Collaborative.
Got it. Well, I'll reach out after this, after we wrap up here, and make sure I'm following you. Well, thank you so much, Terry. And I'll also link to your book in the show notes, so people, or your books, I should say, both of them, in the show notes, so people can find that easily. It's also called The Words We Choose, so easy to Google. But thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. And I really appreciate learning from you, and I can't wait to read your books.
Thank you, Kelly. It's been great fun.
Looking for a community of women writers to support and inspire you on your journey? Join the Author Power Circle. Connect weekly with fellow authors, stay accountable, and move your book forward in an encouraging community. Learn more at kellyshuckneck.com.